Mark and Sandra entered the bustling restaurant, scanning the room expectantly. They were eager to reunite with their families for a long-awaited dinner. As they stepped inside, they spotted Paul and Lucy, Sandra's children, seated in a quiet, secluded booth alongside Lizzie, Mark's daughter. Assuming their spouses must have briefly stepped away or were running late, they approached the table with smiles, unaware of the unexpected conversation that awaited them. Mark smoothly slid into the booth, pulled out a chair, and made himself comfortable. Sandra followed suit, her eyes quickly scanning the surroundings before joining him. Paying no mind to the unusual circumstances, they took their seats, ready to enjoy a joyful evening together, completely unaware of the shocking revelation that was about to unfold. Mark pulled out a chair and plopped down in the booth, greeting the group cheerfully, "Hey, kids." Sandra, glancing around the restaurant, followed his lead and pulled out her own chair before asking, "Where are Jim and Sarah?" Paul interjected, explaining, "We asked them to give us a little time alone with you." Sandra's smile widened, "Is there some important news? I suppose we should feel honored that you wanted to tell us first." Lizzie, with a serious expression, replied, "I think it's more that we wanted to share something we've found out." Mark, noticing the change in tone, asked with concern, "You all sound so serious. What's going on? Is everything all right?" His gaze shifted to his daughter. Lizzie remained silent. Lucy, seemingly unfazed by the gravity of the conversation, spoke to Sandra, her mother, "Pineapple fudge." Sandra's throat tightened, leaving her momentarily speechless. Her face turned pale, like a ghostly sheet, as she tried to process the unfolding conversation. Mark, completely thrown off by the sudden twist, responded with a puzzled look, his voice clearly laced with confusion. "Pineapple fudge? What are you talking about?" Lizzie seized the opportunity to shed light on the situation and addressed her father with a leading question. "Good question, Dad. Sandra, do you want to explain it to him?" At that moment, Lucy, Sandra's daughter, jumped in again, her words laced with sarcasm. "Yes, Mom. Don't you want to explain to my biological father what pineapple fudge means?" Sandra, struggling with the shock of such a revelation, stammered as she tried to gather her thoughts. I expected. How did you? Where did you hear about pineapple fudge?" Paul, maintaining a calm demeanor, interjected with a tone that carried a hint of accusation. "From your diaries, of course. Where you write everything down, right? It's your secret code for, today I had sex with a man who isn't my husband but happens to be his best friend, isn't it?" His gaze shifted back and forth between his mother and Mark, his eyes filled with indignation, barely concealed in his voice. Lucy, feeling the weight of the revelation, expressed a bittersweet sentiment. "I always wished I had an older sister." As she said this, she gently squeezed Paul's hand beneath the table. Her eyes moved to Lizzie, and she added with genuine tenderness, "And I've known and loved Lizzie my whole life," she said, gently squeezing Lizzie's hand in return. But then her tone shifted, filled with contempt as she turned her attention to Mark. "Still, it's a bit shocking to hear that we share a biological father." The weight of her words hung in the air, emphasizing the deep sense of betrayal and hurt she felt toward Mark and Sandra, whose actions had shattered the foundation and trust of both families. Paul, his voice carrying a mix of frustration and disappointment, confronted Mark with the truth that had finally come to light. "Did you really think we'd never find out? In a world of DNA testing, genetic conditions, and ancestry research, it was bound to come out sooner or later." Mark remained silent for a moment, absorbing the full weight of Paul's words before adopting a defensive tone. "Look, kids, we're really sorry you had to find out this way. But it doesn't have to change anything. Lucy, Paul, I'm still the same Uncle Mark you've known your whole lives." His attempt to reassure them sounded weak in the face of broken trust. Continuing his explanation, Mark pleaded, "Jim and Sarah don't need to know about this. It would only hurt them and serve no real purpose." In his effort to protect their domestic stability, Mark failed to grasp the profound impact the revelation had already had on the dynamics of both families. Jim's voice cut through the tension, striking Mark and Sandra as they realized their missing partners had approached the table unnoticed. "A little late for that, old friend. You're about 3 months too late." Jim pulled out a chair and sat down. The weight of his words hung like a stone in the air, underscoring the depth of the betrayal. Sarah joined them at the table, her face reflecting anger and disappointment. "Besides, Jim found out first and told me. We decided together to tell the kids." She sat down, her movements laced with restrained fury, and her voice simmering with rage as she addressed Sandra directly. Sarah's words dripped with sharp sarcasm. "And now, after our weekend with Jim, I really don't think 'no real purpose' is an accurate assessment." She smirked at Sandra, a mixture of indignation and mockery on Sarah's face. "Sandra, I just can't understand what was going through your miserable little head. You traded Michelin-starred chocolate ganache for a stale, dried-up piece of pineapple fudge. I'm honestly glad the kids insisted on extra time, because I could barely walk here from our hotel room." Mark's shock quickly turned into anger as the truth dawned on him. His voice trembled with a mix of disbelief and outrage. "Wait, you and Jim? You're having an affair?" Lucy, though clearly upset, couldn't help but let out a bitter laugh at the irony of Mark's reaction. "You're actually upset about this? Isn't that a bit hypocritical?" Her tone carried a hint of sarcasm, calling out the double standard. Sandra, slowly regaining her composure, stepped in with a calm but firm tone. "Wait a second. If you two were together, then we're even. Jim, you got your revenge." She met the accusing eyes of her children and husband. "Now we need to figure out how to move forward and work on rebuilding both of our families." A flicker of determination appeared in her eyes as she assumed the role of leader. Sandra's voice grew stronger as she continued, her resolve guiding her words. "This doesn't have to change anything. Mark and I will end our affair, and the two of you will end yours. We can all get through this." There was conviction in her voice, as if she were determined to chart a path toward healing and restoration in the face of shattered trust. A flash of shock and deep anger crossed Jim's eyes as he listened to Sandra's attempt to level the playing field. His voice dripped with bitterness as he replied, "Well, that might seem fair to someone, my dear. It might be, if it weren't complete idiocy." He paused, his anger simmering beneath the surface. His words poured out like a flood of pain born from betrayal. "You've had an affair with that sack of garbage for 20 years. You conceived a child together and told me he was mine. All this time, Sarah and I have been friends, close friends, but we never did anything inappropriate. How the hell does that make us equal?" Sandra's confusion was evident as she replied, "Sarah just said you spent the weekend together." Sarah's mocking tone cut through the air as she countered, "We did. And it was magical. Sweetheart, turns out that at our age, not all men are total disappointments." She smirked, clearly enjoying the opportunity to tease her husband. Lucy chimed in playfully, "Yo, Mom." If Sandra had been in a more stable state of mind, she might have noticed that her daughter had just called another woman Mom, but in her confusion, she missed it. She would understand soon enough. Jim's voice grew firmer as he continued, a note of triumph in his words. "But you're wrong, Sandra. We never had an affair. Because by the time I first touched Sarah intimately, we had both already filed official divorce papers. You were too busy on your so-called business trip that weekend for us to bother servicing you, but..." He raised his hand, pointing to a man standing by the door. The atmosphere grew tense as the unidentified man responded to Jim's gesture and approached the table. Wasting no time, he delivered his message in a cold, formal tone. "Sandra Davis. Mark Willis. You've been served." He handed each of them a thick brown envelope. Its contents were no secret. Then the man stepped back, pulled out a camera, and took a photo to capture the moment, before nodding to Jim and walking away, leaving the guilty party stunned and disoriented. Silence fell over the table as Mark and Sandra exchanged glances, both frantically trying to process the sudden turn of events. The weight of the envelopes had completely altered their lives, adding yet another layer of uncertainty to an already turbulent situation. Sandra's composure began to crack. Her voice trembled with desperation, and tears streamed down her face. "I don't want a divorce. This isn't how it was supposed to happen. Mark and I don't love each other, it meant nothing. I love you, Jim. I've only ever loved you." Her words were filled with pain as she pleaded with her husband, hoping to salvage their broken relationship. Sandra shifted her gaze from Jim to Lucy and Paul, her children, her voice breaking with emotion. "Lucy, Paul, tell him. Tell your father this doesn't have to destroy our family." Her pleas were directed at the children, hoping they could help bridge the chasm between their parents. Mark, who had remained silent, appeared completely shattered. His face reflected the immense pain he felt. He seemed lost, unable to find the words to express the depth of his remorse and regret. In a silent act of solidarity and support, Jim, Sarah, Paul, Lucy, and Lizzie placed their hands on the table, intertwining their fingers. Their unified gesture underscored their commitment to one another, their recognition of the challenges ahead, and the strength and support they would offer each other to face the future. Jim's stern voice echoed through the room, drawing attention and signaling that it was time for Sandra to listen. The weight of the decision made by all five of them was unmistakable. "Sandra, I think it's time for you to shut up and listen. The five of us have been discussing how to move forward for a month now. All our ducks are in a row, and as far as I'm concerned, none of this is up for revision." Lizzie spoke up in a firm tone, confirming the unity behind their decision. "We each thought long and hard about this individually, and then relied on one another to decide how to move forward. We are united in this." She glanced at Paul and Lucy, acknowledging their collective effort. "I'll just add that the three of us came up with the plan, and your spouses initially tried to talk us out of it." Paul, speaking with a sense of maturity and resolve, emphasized the seriousness of the situation. "My younger sister may be the youngest at this table, but she's an adult now, and she has a wise head on her shoulders. She's been the most directly affected by all of this, which is why we asked her to tell you how things are going to proceed." Lucy, sniffling but gathering her strength, spoke with a mix of pain and determination. "So, here's the bottom line." She turned to Mark, her voice firm and unwavering. "Mark, you may have provided the biology, but you were never my father, and you never will be." Her gaze shifted back to Sandra, her expression hardening. "Sandra, you've been my mother my whole life. Not as good a parent as Dad was, but still my mother. Well, that ends tonight. From this moment on, you and I have no relationship. I don't want to talk to you, read your messages, or have any contact at all. That might change someday, but I wouldn't count on it. And if it does, it'll be my decision. I'm sure you both object to this, but I want it clear, neither of you is to ever contact me again. I can assure you, you won't get a response." Paul, looking at his shattered and nearly catatonic mother, echoed Lucy's feelings. "The same goes for me." Lizzie, resolute and unwavering, added her voice. "For me too." Sarah, calm but firm, addressed the practical side of their decision. "Jim and I share an attorney, his contact information is in the envelopes you're holding. From now on, all communication must go through him." An awkward silence settled over the table as the weight of their words sank in. The path forward had been laid out, and the consequences of their choices would undoubtedly change their lives. Jim, after a meaningful pause, allowed the silence to thicken, giving Sandra and Mark time to absorb the gravity of what had been revealed. Breaking the silence, he moved on to the next point. All 8 grandparents were informed about this today. He turned his gaze to Sandra. "Your parents," he nodded, "and yours," he said, pointing at Mark, "did nothing wrong, and we don't want to cut them out of their grandchildren's lives." There was care and consideration in his words, as Jim had always respected and loved their extended family. He continued, clearly laying out the conditions. "However, their continued involvement depends on whether they accept this situation. They must not pass along any messages from you to the children, and they will not be informing you about any aspects of our lives. He made it clear that the boundaries set for Sandra and Mark also applied to their parents. While they may maintain a relationship with you, it must in no way interfere with or influence the dynamics of our family. Mark, your mom and dad are eager to get to know their new granddaughter better, and we absolutely support Lucy in building that relationship. At the same time, it's no surprise that, for my parents, nothing has changed. They love Lucy more than anything in the world, and nothing will ever change that. What was once a united family structure had been forever changed, and the new boundaries would reshape not only the relationships between Sandra, Mark, and the children, but also between their parents and grandchildren. Sarah stepped in. We're not leaving. This isn't New York or Los Angeles. We could run into each other at a restaurant or on the street. Her tone was filled with anger, a clear warning, and a firm boundary. With noticeable restraint, Sarah continued, her voice laced with determination. I strongly suggest that both of you pretend you don't know me. It took every ounce of my self-control not to slap you both tonight. The depth of her anger was unmistakable, and it was clear that maintaining composure during future encounters might not be an easy task. Then Lizzie's voice took on a more positive, though still strained, tone as it became her turn to speak, but in a way, Sandra, you were right. Her words hung in the air, drawing the attention of everyone at the table. That a noticeable shift occurred as Lizzie addressed her Aunt Sandra by simply calling her Sandra, abandoning the familiar and affectionate title. It was a subtle, yet significant sign of the strained relationship. She paused briefly before delivering the unexpected news, her tone still laced with a mix of emotions. I want to share some good news. Actually, 2 pieces of good news. Paul and I are getting married. And it's happening soon, because in about 7 months, your first grandchild will be joining us. For a moment, a flicker of joy appeared in Sandra's eyes upon hearing the news, but the weight of the earlier discussion quickly extinguished it. Likewise, the hopeful expression on Mark's face faltered as he realized the complicated consequences of the situation. Paul, brushing aside any lingering positivity, spoke plainly, his voice filled with a mix of disappointment and resolve. Lizzie and I talked about how your betrayal affected our relationship. It's pretty damn weird that we now share a half-sister. But in the end, we've been inseparable since the first day we met at playgroup. There was a trace of bitterness in his words, but also a firm refusal to let their parents' actions destroy the bond between the children. Although it will always be overshadowed by the fact that it's where you two first met, there's no reason to let your awful behavior destroy our relationship. Lizzie continued, the baby came as a surprise, and it's happening earlier than we originally planned. But we've always wanted children. Her words carried sincerity, reflecting a deep desire for stability and love amid the chaos. Her voice grew stronger. Our parents, the 2 who remain, fully support our decision to start a family now. Lizzie emphasized the support they had received from Jim and Sarah, who stood by them during this pivotal moment. The unwavering backing of their parents offered a glimmer of hope in the midst of all the turmoil, a reminder that there were still foundations of love and care they could rely on. But regardless of what you may think might change in the future, know this, Paul said with unshakable conviction. You will not be at our wedding. You will not be there when your first grandchild is born, or any after that. You will not spoil them, play with them, or babysit them so we can have a night off. His words painted a picture of firm boundaries that he looked at Sandra, a mixture of emotions crossing his face before he continued. You won't get their photos, won't hear their first words, and won't catch them when they fall. The weight of those words was palpable, illustrating the profound loss both sides would experience. That he looked at Jim, and a flicker of gratitude and respect appeared in his eyes. Mom, he said, addressing Sarah, trying out the new title for the first time. The subtle shift in how he addressed her carried deep meaning, signaling a change in their relationship. Paul's voice softened as he realized the burden that would now fall on Jim and Sarah. Mom and Dad will have to carry the responsibility of being the only grandparents. Despite the seriousness of the conversation, Sarah couldn't help but smile at the thought of becoming a grandmother, and at hearing Paul call her Mom. Delivering the final blow, Paul turned to Mark and said, "Mark, you're not walking Lizzie down the aisle. That honor belongs to Dad. Frankly, you already gave up the right to give her away." Jim's voice carried firm resolve as he addressed the matter of making these changes publicly known. "Sarah and I did nothing wrong, and we have no intention of hiding the reasons for the breakdown of our marriages from our friends and acquaintances." Lucy continued in a barely audible voice, "I want people to know. I want them to understand why I've completely cut you out of my life, Mom, so they'll judge you harshly, not me." Her need for others to understand the weight of her decision reflected a deep desire for validation and acknowledgement. "I don't want you at my graduation next month. Yes, it's a public event, and I can't stop you from attending." Lucy's voice grew stronger, carrying a mix of determination and concern for her reputation. "But I've earned the respect of my teachers and my friends' parents, and I don't want to lose that by spitting in your face if you show up." Lizzie chimed in with a crooked smile, injecting a touch of humor into the tense atmosphere. "That is, of course, assuming Mom hasn't already rearranged your face by then, Sandra." There was an edge in her voice, hinting that if Mark and Sandra didn't take the message seriously, the consequences might be not just emotional, but physical. All five of them stood up, leaving Sandra and Mark alone in the ruins of their broken world. "One last thing," Jim began firmly, his steady gaze fixed on the cheating former spouses. "I had a loving friendship with Sarah for 20 years. It won't take much to turn that into a real relationship." He gestured toward Sarah, acknowledging the depth of their bond. "I've already fallen for her, just from the support she's given me these past 3 months." He looked directly at Sandra and Mark. "Betrayal won't break me. And I won't let it break Sarah." His words were a defiant challenge, a refusal to be shattered by the pain inflicted. "Maybe you laughed at us behind our backs for the past 20 years, but for the next 50, I'll be laughing with Sarah." He emphasized the joy and happiness that awaited him and Sarah, now free from the burden of broken relationships. Turning to Sarah, Jim softened his tone. "Sarah, I've fallen in love with you. It's still too soon to expect you to feel the same, but I want you to give me a chance." His words carried a plea, a request for patience and the opportunity to build something new. "And when you do," Jim continued, his voice growing stronger, "I want us to dedicate our future to each other, before God and our children. Our partners may not have taken their vows seriously, but we never betrayed them. And you can be sure that when we make our own vows, they'll be just as deep, sincere, and meaningful." When Jim first spoke to Sarah, it was entirely possible that it was still too soon for her to feel the same deep emotions he felt for her, but looking at her tearful smile, it was clear to anyone that by now, she did feel the same. Jim and Sarah, arm in arm, followed their 3 children out. United and ready to forge a new path together, guided by love and a shared determination to find happiness amid the ruins, Sandra and Mark were left behind to deal with the consequences of their actions. Thank you for being with us. And if you're one of those who watches silently, just leave a like, it helps new stories come to light.